Super Madmen, Act 2. Interior, Sterling Cooper, Executive Floor, Day. Joan Holloway knocks on the door of a corner office. She's mid-20s, sophisticated, white. Jimmy Olsen stands beside her, an exuberant 25-year-old with freckled white skin and a shock of red hair. "Mr. Draper?" Joan asks, before she unlocks the door, opens it for a peek, and closes it. Joan continues, "It's not unusual for him to work all night or come in early, but we're in luck. As a rule, you should always arrive before and leave after your boss. Right, Miss Holloway?" Jimmy interrupts. Joan calmly replies, "Yes. Now, Jimmy, secretarial positions for creative directors are normally reserved for girls, I know. So for a man, it should be a breeze," Jimmy says. "I was going to say someone with more experience," Joan says, with a slight edge. "Jeepers, Miss Holloway. I just sure would like to do a swell job is all. Sorry for cutting you off," Jimmy concedes. Joan firmly but warmly says, "Of course. His last girl left abruptly, so I've been covering his desk. I'm bringing you in on a trial basis. If you work out, you may be hired on permanently. You should know, creatives require special handling. You will need to be a gatekeeper, giving way only to the right people and information. To learn to do so, you'll need my guidance and a mastery of creative truth." Jimmy pipes up, "Oh, I'm great at lying. I won't lie to you, but I know what to play close to the vest." Joan explains, "Don't be too honest or people will think you're hiding something. But don't be too vague or they'll know you are. Don't assume, but always anticipate. Don't ever do too much, but never do too little." "How will I know the difference?" Jimmy asks. Joan simply replies, "You'll succeed or I'll fire you." Becky approaches, a warm, tall black woman who faintly resembles Michael Holt, the young black man from the protest. She hands Joan a note and says, "Miss Holloway, the girls at the switch said to get this to you fast." Joan takes the note and says, "Thank you, Becky. This is Jimmy. It's his first day, too." "Becky's starting on our switchboard, Jimmy." As Joan reads the note, Jimmy and Becky share a quick wave before she hurries away. Joan's demeanor suddenly tightens. Then she starts to back away rapidly, too, as she says, "I had hoped to introduce you to Mr. Draper, but an emergency's come up with Luther & Sons, our most important client. Wait here until Mr. Draper arrives. Don't let anyone else in." "How will I know who he is?" Jimmy asks. Joan says, "When he walks in, the room tilts." Confused, Jimmy asks, The room what?" But Joan is gone, leaving Jimmy alone in the vast space. It's corporate yet not antiseptic. Whitewashed walls, linoleum, a large bullpen of desks in the center, private offices on the outskirts. Employees working or arriving. Jimmy sits at the desk in front of Don's office. He starts to arrange it when the tone of the floor changes. Don enters quickly and the chatter drops. He's scanning a newspaper as he arrives at Jimmy's desk and doesn't look up. Jimmy stands and says, "Mr. Draper, I'm Jimmy." "Not now, son," a forceful voice commands. Don and Jimmy turn to see Roger Sterling, 50s, affluent, white. Roger's on a warpath toward Don. The office chatter completely stops. Roger leads Don into interior, Don Draper's office, continuous. It's impressive. Wood paneling and a personal bar. A view of Metropolis. Don circles behind the desk and tosses the paper down. It's the Daily Planet. The front page is one of Lois's photos of Superman fighting the robots in the gallery. "You made today's Planet," Roger says. "You think I'm Superman?" Don asks. "No, he saves lives. Your work's closer to the crime section or the obituaries," Roger replies as he grabs the paper and tears it open to the business section. There's a blurb entitled Sterling K.O. Ooper. Roger asks, "Did you really defend Dr. Envoyd's honor? I hired you. You never knocked anybody out for me." "How'd this happen?" Don asks. "Columnist was there. Saw the whole thing. I myself don't object, but Luther & Sons and the 40% of our billing they provide do. You need to end whatever this is post-haste," Roger says. "Women already take Envoyd for menstrual disorders with FDA approval. They know it stops pregnancy too. Searle just wants to market it that way now." Roger says, "Luther Sr. doesn't think it's so trivial. I got a very biblical and unpleasant wake-up call this morning. Jesus. It's too early to drink apply to poison." Roger crosses to the bar and starts to grab a bottle of whiskey. He stops short, crosses back, grabs the paper and says, "Not to mention this pill's side effects. Vaginal bleeding, loss of mood control, breast engorgement." On second thought, that may not be bad. Don says, "And I so hope you'd make it through this without jokes." Roger replies, "Couldn't help myself." "Shame there's no pill for that," Don says. Roger counters, "Your pill causes vomiting and weight gain. How's it control birth by making women repulsive?" We could launch one of the most significant discoveries in history, Don says. Roger keeps going. And if it has long-term side effects? If it's another Lysol douche or Catholics boycott? We end up with a between-the-thighs surprise. Hell, contraception's still a felony in Connecticut and Massachusetts. Don says, Comstock laws are a joke. Roger says, you have to end this. Don replies, we can't. Envoy narrowed it down to us or Leo Burnett. We can't just give this business to those jerks from Gotham. This is news now. Roger says, Envoy hires us, Luther may fire us. They're already facing liability suits and every quack in a lab coat finding new ways their products cause cancer. Give me a few days. I can bring Luther Sr. around, Don assures. Roger says, yes, you will, only today. Alex the Great is in town and shall decree our fate in person, and we are rolling out the red carpet. Showtime's at 5, so wash your dog and braid your pony's hair. Don asks, and Envoy? We can overcome failure or rejection, but canceling a potential client at 4 for one threatening to leave at 5 is inept, Roger says, off Don's look. Roger makes up his mind and says, all right, but Luther and Envoy cannot cross paths. So get Dr. Sex to demonstrate the oldest form of birth control, early withdrawal. Roger leaves, shutting the door behind him. Don balls up the paper in anger as he hits the intercom on his desk and says, Joan, get me everyone on Luther, 15 minutes. Jimmy says over the intercom, Joan's not here, Mr. Draper, but who are you? Don asks as he stares through his door with x-ray vision to see. Interior, Sterling Cooper, executive floor, continuous. Jimmy confidently says into the intercom, I'm Jimmy Olsen, your new assistant. The office door swings open. Don steps out and says, I'm Mr. Draper. Sorry I can't give you a proper introduction, but today just got twice as difficult. Well, maybe if we work twice as hard, it won't be half bad, Jimmy says. Don stares down at him, straight-faced. I'm sorry, I was just trying. Jimmy starts. You're fine, but I need to work. Call extension 16. Tell Mr. Romano to get everyone on Luther up here in 15 minutes, and no disturbances until then, Don says before he steps back into the office, shuts the door, and locks it. Cut to. A wall of opaque crystal suddenly becomes transparent. Interior, Fortress of Solitude, medical chamber, day. Jor-El, a stoic, white Kryptonian man stands before it with Lara, a demure, white Kryptonian woman. Both are young and wearing elegant red cloaks adorned with Superman's S. The chamber is translucent crystal that amplifies daylight. On the other side of the wall, Brainiac and the severely burnt woman lie in separate coves on radiant beds of liquid crystal. Medical robots wash and examine them. Jor-El says, and beyond revive, he could not understand a word. I told you, Lara, he should never have matured without speaking our languages. Lara replies, Jor-El, he recognized it as Kandorian. Do you think, could that really be her? As they stare at the severely burnt woman, a door slides open nearby. Don enters, still in his work suit and tie. Jor-El says to him, Kal-El, do you think it wise to focus on more than one life now? Good morning, Father. Mother? Don says. Kal, what have your automatons learned? Lara asks. Don approaches the translucent wall and it comes alive. Horizontal and vertical streams of data race across. They have to finish repairing the ship before I can get into it and access its data, but exams show she and I are related paternally, Don says. Kara. Jor-El, it is really Kara, Lara says with bittersweet excitement. Jor-El says, my sister's daughter. And it, as Don keeps reading, he says, they're a Kryptonian living computer. An ancient deep space probe sent to scan the universe years before Krypton fell. Thought all those were supposed to be dead. Will they live? Lara asks. Don says, the machine has significant damage but was exposed to much less radiation. Kara, her entire body is failing. She's nearly brain dead. Are her reproductive organs capable of discharging ovum? Jor-El asks. That's your niece, Don says. He continues, and she's absorbed well beyond a fatal dose of radiation for a Kryptonian. Can the strength you get from Earth's sun save her? Lara asks. That's the plan. But first, she has to survive decontamination, Don replies. We do not pass on the effects of radiation hereditarily. Her eggs may be the last hope for our people, Jor-El implores. If we sacrifice our ethics, there is no hope for our people, Don says. Jor-El reasons, this is not right or wrong. This is survival or extinction. Before Krypton disintegrated, it's invasive, Don interrupts. It is something we must consider before we do not have a choice, Jor-El says. We already don't, Don says definitively. Then he asks Jor-El, before Krypton imploded, you put me in your escape capsule and ordered Mother to join me. Why didn't you force her? Don starts to leave. Jor-El steps in front of him. Lara steps between them and says, there was not enough room for your father and I would not let him die alone. This isn't our choice. This isn't our chance to save the entire Kryptonian race. Just her, Don says. Lara starts, this was the only way to be. Don cuts through them. Their holographic forms flicker as he exits and Lara finishes saying, together. Cut to, interior, Hotel Metropolis Steakhouse, day. Trudy Vogel, 20s, impeccably put together, white, sits alone in a booth for a long beat. Moderate diamond on her ring finger, elegant watch on her wrist. She checks the time and space. It's packed. Lunch crowd patrons without tables wait by the entry. Several eye Trudy as the waiter Don knocked down approaches with a slight limp and asks, Miss, are you ready to order yet? I'm terribly sorry. I'm sure he'll be here soon. He promised, Trudy says. Let me guess. He's a suit? Word of advice. Never trust the word of a man in a suit, the waiter suggests. Trudy says, you're all in suits. Cut to, interior Don Draper's office, moments later. Peter Campbell sits in a side chair. Paul, Ken, and Harry, a trio of chummy white junior execs, are spread out on the couch in Don's sitting area. Salvatore Romano, 30s, fastidious, white, sits in an armchair. Don stands and commands. For those who read the article, it's mostly true. For those who didn't, you're not doing your jobs. For now, worry about today. The Luthers are coming at 5, and we will impress them. Paul hesitantly says, but you've rejected everything. That simply means you are already in the group not doing their job, Don replies. And Envoy, do you have copy yet? Sal asks. No, but Envoy is still on, Don says. Pete gently broaches. Pardon me for asking, Don, but how? Don cuts him off and said, we simply will, Pete. Before the close of business, we will win a new client and regain the confidence of our largest account. Get on board or get out. End Act 2. To be continued.